Well, welcome to this afternoon's session. What is wrong with the Utah Jazz, and will they ever win an NBA championship? Oh, that could take up the rest of the day. Welcome to our session, Researching the History of a Place. My name is Bim Oliver. I am the moderator, and I would like to welcome you to our conversation this afternoon. In this session, we're going to learn how to research the history of a place. Could be a building, could be a site, it could even be a community. Even if, and I would say especially if, you're not a professional historian. It's geared to those of you who would like to do the research but don't know where to start. To those of you who have dabbled in research but would like to hone your skills, or to those of you who have done extensive research but would like to expand your capabilities. This afternoon's panel comprises some of Utah's most accomplished historians. I've had the pleasure to read works by all three, and I'm excited to join you today in learning from them. Angie Abram will speak first on how to gather the documentary information about a place. She'll be followed by Eileen Hallett-Stone, who will speak about how to gather the oral histories associated with a place. And we'll conclude with Dr. Armando Solorzano, who will speak to how to gather the history of a place occupied by underrepresented peoples, and perhaps by extension, how to gather the histories of underrepresented peoples. I should note that these topics aren't mutually exclusive. There isn't some kind of partition between them. So we're going to benefit perhaps from the fact that some of our panelists may speak on shared issues from different perspectives. I'd like to introduce the panel in order of appearance. Angie Abram is the owner and principal of Storiagraph LLC Historic Preservation Consulting, a company she started in 2012 after graduating from the University of Utah with a master's degree in architecture. Some of her most recent work that I've had the pleasure to read includes nominations to the National Register of Historic Places for historic districts in Morgan and Tremont, as well as for historic homes in counties throughout the state. Eileen Hallett-Stone is a transplant from New England, a Utah-based writer and former Salt Lake Tribune living history columnist. She has published books that address issues of equity, community, and ethnic history. Her collected stories, A Homeland in the West, Utah Jews Remember, were developed into a photo documentary exhibit, and her commentaries have been featured in documentary films for KUED and the National Center for Jewish Film. She is currently teaching for the University of Utah's Osher program and working on a new book. Dr. Armando Solorzano is an associate professor in family and consumer studies and in ethnic studies at the University of Utah. He has published extensively on the history and contributions of Chicanx, Hispanic, and Latinx peoples in the state of Utah. In his 32 years of teaching, he has addressed various topics, including the Chicanx Latinx experience, ethnic minority families in the USA, and transnationality and diaspora communities in the USA. And I would like to introduce, as a start, Angie Abram.
Hello, I feel a little out of practice here, speaking in front of audiences. As well, it's very odd to be doing a presentation on researching history at a history conference, okay? So I'm hoping that I'm the concrete step, and then these guys are the ones that go into deeper things, because let me just say, every property history is a history of people. You know, it doesn't have any meaning at all without the people who lived there and walked by and associated with any building or piece of land or anything, object. So without further ado, I will, oh dear, this isn't my presentation. We're gonna. You can do mine. Oh, sweet. I'm gonna be really good at it too. There is no back.
By the way, while we have this brief intermission, I'd like to say there are handouts over here on the stage. We made 7 of each. No, I'm just kidding. There are handouts over there, and I should say, if you don't get a hard copy, don't fret, because all of this material is going to be posted online following the conference. So if you get a handout, great. If you don't, you should be able to get it online.
Will the presentations from all the different also be available?
We can make them available, I think, yeah. I can make promises because I'm not in charge. Yeah, sure, whatever.
Okay, now I'm feeling better. I'm feeling a lot better about it.
Oh, there you are.
What's that? Okay, let's, am I, all right, you're doing the, okay, I did it. Okay. So, in doing this, to kind of make it more exciting, I went and looked to see, get a snappy quote, do something like that. But what I found was this survey that Chatham University did for their undergraduate students. And what's the hardest part of research? And this was their order of precedence. And I thought, this is the perfect presentation order, too. Get started, avoid distractions or shiny objects, or as I like to say, rabbit holes. Locate your information, evaluate your sources, organize them, and then you procrastinate heavily, or at least I do. And then you write the paper. There are really a million reasons why people do research, of course, and why you'd want to know the history of any place. So the sources of information that I'm going to talk about hopefully are general enough that if you're not doing it from a super technical point of view, which is kind of my bailiwick, then you'll find information that's useful and has meaning to your search. Okay? So, getting started. Since my portion is about buildings, there are 3 really great places to start. The Utah State Historic Preservation Office has how to research your house, and this could be, generalized to be a property or anything else in the physical sense. So it's a really great instruction. It's one of the 7 handouts that we photocopied. So, and it's a really great one. It explains, what tax records include, what you'd look for in those. The second handout I prepared was one that actually has digital resources that are related to the SHPO's how to research your house. And the second resource is researching property history from the state archives. I don't think these guys get enough credit for that particular post. It's awesome because they look at it from a records, what does the county recorder, what records do they preserve? And so theirs are exactly what they are and how they categorize them, but they also have one of the best meets and bounds explanations I've probably ever read, which is very difficult in researching property, is trying to figure out how many rods and chains and links from this point to that point to that point, and they're a really good explanation. So I start there if you're researching property that isn't lots and blocks in a town. So the third one is when you get there, you can procrastinate. So avoiding distractions. In property history, there's an endless amount of information out there, endless. So it really helps to have an idea of your goal when you start. And I'm doing it in terms of significance and integrity, just because those are the kind of words that historic preservationists use. But I don't really mean it in the technical sense. So don't get all, if it's not the significance that the National Park Service thinks is important, it's not important. That's not. Importance is the meaning that you have for it, and it's if that's important, if it's the first owner, if it's their experiences, if it's anything. So, but it's nice to frame it in this way so that you can make sure you don't end up in rabbit holes. So significance. I'm going to start with the definition of significance, and it can lean towards all 4 of these. for me. The first two blend together, but backwards. So significance is something that is conveyed as a meaning often obscurely or indirectly, and then or conveying or implying. Well, in history, in my experience, those terms happen the same way. So if you're sitting at an event, the significance is directly conveyed. If you're looking at 100 years later, it's probably obscure. My funny example is 1960s carports. Okay, so they're awesome, right? And if you had one, and if you grew up and you go, oh, carport, yep. But if you were 50 years before, you'd have a garage, and if you were 20 years after, you'd have a garage, maybe attached to the house now. But in 100 years, explaining why you have a shed roof attached to your nice brick house is going to be obscure. So the third one, the quality of being important at the moment. And in building research, it's often when the house is built or when it's substantially remodeled. And then the statistical definition, which is, my favorite part of research, is 1 of X. It's 1 hall parlor out of 5 in Tremont, So, or is it unique? I include this just because it covered every single thing I could think of about significance in a nicely organized way. So don't think of the National Register part of it. Think of it as a really concise way to look at all of the different parts of significance and integrity. So they say the quality of significance in history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture, right, is present in groups of buildings, single sites, buildings, structures, objects that possess integrity. And their definition of integrity, of course, is location, design, what it was meant to be, the setting around it, the materials, the workmanship, the feeling, which is people, right? Association. And they're all associated with, and then they just, sum up everything else. Events, people, buildings, architecture, and archaeology. So to me, it's everything. But I like the way they do it because thinking of the 7 factors of integrity really help you identify what's important in a building. What is it? Or a site or any of your research. And the reason why I keep doing on significance and integrity is that it's important to have an idea of what you're looking for so that you can find it. If you go blindly looking at research, So I'm going to move on to integrity. And Corey back there is the one who I think finally said this to me back when I was a puppy researcher. The original if the original owner or the most significant person in the history of the building strolled up to the front of the building, would they recognize their house? Would they recognize their business? Would they recognize the place? Would the plants be the same? Would the landscape, be relatable? Depending on what you're looking at. And that's integrity to me. And it always, and that's what, in building research is understanding when and whom and how the building was constructed, when it was modified, and researching the significance of people who designed, built, or used the building. So when you look at historic building integrity, tax records are really great to look at, photographs, family photographs, Sanborn maps. Those guys were amazing at documenting buildings and how they looked, what they used. If you read tax cards, those guys, there's 100 or 150 different data points on there. You have to look at each little column because they checked them all. Was it a furnace? Was it a boiler? Was the roof shake? Was it shingles? Was it, it's all there. So locating the information. We're moving along. Doing okay, everybody's after lunch? Nobody's asleep yet? Okay, I'm glad I got first. So check to see if the property's been researched. Okay, and I recommend the Historic Utah Building Database, even though they don't feature it on their website very prominently. I do have the link to it in the handout. Okay, it's awesome. They've managed over the past several years to digitize almost their entire collection of research and district nominations and everything else. And so if you have a house, you can look for it. Essentially, you can zoom in on a web map and look at it and click on the thing. And if you follow the links down far enough, you can look at their scanned folder that they used to have in file cabinets at the Rio Grande building. It's excellent. Really good research. A lot of billions of hours from people researching since the 70s. And if your house is in a district, the early district nominations have the history of every single house that's now digitized. Awesome. Ownership, original materials, major reconstructions. They did a great job. So lots of data out there. And then I recommend county recorders, assessors, archives, city and county planning, the building permits, the alterations, the things like that. The Utah State History Library, Utah State Archives, a lot of digital stuff. Sometimes you have to go there, University libraries and others. So the University of Utah Marriott Library hosts the Utah State Histories collection, as well as the SHPO collection, the State Historic Preservation Office collection. So, organizing information. Most of the time in history, one source doesn't count. It's information, not intelligence. So corroborating information is the best practice if you're going to do it. So a tax assessor document with a date combined with maybe a newspaper article. All the newspapers in the state are online. Essentially, the Tribune just went online all the way up to 2004. Very cool. So, so you can look at, or a large change in the valuation in tax records. All those can be proof of changes. So I also recommend city directories, historic plat maps. The people in the assessor's office wrote down the owners of all of those. And so you can look at periodic plat maps and see who lived there. Censuses have addresses after the 30s. So it's easy to find stuff. And establish when someone occupied a particular place. So evaluating sources. This is the shiny objects and rabbit holes. Remember, everything is created by people, and people misremember, people make mistakes. I've certainly made my fair share, but so I thought, in a weird place, like a weird subject like a history conference, how to research history, I thought I'd just give you my idea of what a credible source is. And it doesn't take anything at all away from oral histories nor anything like that, because the physical records are easy. The sources whose business it was to get it right, they're good. Censuses, city directories, the Sanborn maps, they were very good. But it doesn't really tell you about the feeling or the associations of a place. It doesn't tell you about the people very much. And so they can only take you so far, but they're very credible. So you can try to find the right person to do the next step in research in those places. And then next up, sources that are contemporary to the event. The newspaper article about the social at the theater. Great. Next up, personal recollections written in real time or close to real time, and then personal recollections years later. And I like, when you're talking about recollections, I love oral histories, especially directed oral histories, because some of those people who were interviewers have an enormous body of oral histories. And a lot of these are online at the U Library. A lot of the Utah oral histories in the last 60, 70 years, some are at BYU. But they have a whole body of work, and they're really good at directing the people to the right place and to asking good questions about the events. And so they're also very credible. So, digital resources. This is the biggest shiny object of all. And because almost everything in Utah is located on the internet. But it feels like my junk drawer. I know there's a screwdriver in there somewhere, okay? And a lot of the technical information and resources are so immense. I mean, the databases, the scans, that they aren't searchable on global search engines, right? Not even like the main Marriott Library search page doesn't get them. So make sure, use your specific collection searches, use your finding aids, and I always encourage everyone to keep poking around, keep looking. I do have a 20-minute diatribe on the quality of search engine algorithms, but suffice it to say, sometimes when you pay for better search engines, you get better search engines. And I'm not really shilling for something like Ancestry, but oftentimes, or newspapers.com. But sometimes when you do pay for them or use other types of sites like that, they're very easy to refine and catch all of the data about a person. They have really good results. So oftentimes, I'll go to a place that has access to that rather than necessarily always subscribing to them. But, digitalnewspapers.org is the state's one, and it has all of the newspapers. But the search engine is a lot more difficult to deal with. It doesn't catch the resource. It doesn't think like my mind does as fast as some of the others do. So I have that second one is made a list of the sites that I kind of regularly use in researching building, mostly as a way to show what's online rather than exactly where it's located. Because I'm going to say I built this thing last weekend, and I looked it up last night, and the Utah State Archives page had already changed its address, right? So if you'll just, when you take the paper, cross off www in front of archives.utah.gov, and you can find the research guide, but it changed that fast. So, but I tried to explain what it was I was looking for so that you can maybe just do a search and find them again. So, digital search tips. Talking to the choir here. Even more, poke around, click on links, especially in images that don't even look like they ought to be clickable. Do it. So, Family Search in their camera picture on the side of the page, that's the link to the images. But it doesn't seem that way to me. And so I try to think like other people, but, since my, junk drawer is all messy, I don't get them all. In the county assessors, you have to click on an image in the middle of the thing to pull up the records, but it doesn't have a highlighter. It doesn't look like you're supposed to click on it. And then if you use the Utah State Historic Utah Buildings Database, they use ArcGIS, and ArcIMS Viewer is amazing, fabulous. But the pull downs on the side, the little arrows that take you to the 5 records that are associated with your house are teeny. And also because they're all, They're all scalable to phones and tablets and monitors and TVs and all that stuff. They're all relative. So it doesn't show the whole record at one time. You have to scroll down to even see the links to take you to the Marriott Library pages. So scroll down, go right, click on random places, and then try to figure out different ways to frame your question. I like to, Jeopardy, 20 questions, because I'm trying to figure out what some software engineer thought was going to be my search question. I'm trying to reverse engineer back to what they thought I would ask. And so I don't think like them. So I try to find different ways to think like them. Addresses and change. Addresses are, abbreviations are funny. I just was doing Mill Creek Canyon. And Mill Creek Canyon is, in fact, a place, but Mill Creek Canyon is not a road name. And so you can't search for Mill Creek Canyon, but it does come up if you type in Mill Creek. So, many of that. So go shorter. Mill, M-I, keep getting shorter, less things. So, and this last one, this is kind of in the last few years. The search engine returns are kind of spammy. They're aggregator sites and things. So make sure and scroll down and look for the sites that you'd recognize. You know, if you're looking for the county assessor, go find the county assessor. You know, I looked yesterday, and, you know, Carbon County County Assessor was the 5th entry down on the page. I'm like, it wasn't a hard question, but. And then write the paper. Don't procrastinate. I skipped that step, so I wouldn't do it right here. So remember your goals: significance, integrity, and let the documentation reflect what you found. You know, it's history. Everything isn't there. So possible, probable, most likely, circa, around, perfectly legal and legitimate to do in research. But, and I would also say, not evaluating and editing the information can be a huge distraction later. I used to think quality was good, and so I'd turn in, like, you know, inch-deep stuff, but nobody wants to read it. And I forget what's in there after a short time. So condensing it and making it readable, very important. All right, now you're on to the better parts. Any questions at the end? Yes. So I'm going to take off. Thank you for your time.